Another day, another FrostSpark card revealed. Yesterday, during her Twitch stream, Jelly revealed a new card by the name of Destruction Tutor. This is a 5-cost intelligence creature. It's a 3/5 high elf, if that matters to you. And the text on the card says, "Your actions that deal damage cost 2 less." Now, this is a really interesting card because there's some archetypes that have existed for a long time that have been good and then they've been bad, and a lot of it has to do with nerfs to previous cards like Crystal Tower Crafter. A lot of it has to do with the rise and fall of Withered Hand Cultist in the meta, which is still kind of a boogeyman to this day. So right now, like if this card, comes out tomorrow, I'm not sure that this card is going to be very good, but it will at least spark people to maybe revisit some of those archetypes. I think this is a natural fit in something like Action Assassin or Action Mage, because obviously allowing you to play more actions means more synergy, more triggers, all of the things you want. Now, the real reason that I don't think this is going to see a ton of play is because this is kind of a big-bodied, glorified Mages Guild recruit in many ways. It's going to make your actions cheaper, but when you play this card, it doesn't do anything immediately to the board. It does not have guard. It doesn't do anything to help keep you alive. The 3/5 stats are nice. The 5 health is really important because you do want this to try to stay alive long enough to get value. But it does also cost 5, so you're going to want to get some use out of this to make this have been worth your time. And in order to make use of this card, you also have to expend other cards, other resources from your hand, right? So that's the biggest issue with this card to me, because there's not a lot of great ways after you have, say, successfully resolved this, right? Here's our scenario. You play Destruction Tutor, and you've got, a Reverberating Strike, a Crushing Blow, and, I don't know, a Lightning Bolt or something in your hand. You resolve your Destruction Tutor, it survives, and now it's your next turn, and you have the Magicka to go ham, right? Your Reverberating Strike costs 1, your Crushing Blow costs 1, your Lightning Bolt costs 2. Presumably you're at 6 Magicka at this point, so you get to play 3 actions really cheap and then maybe a 2-drop. But in order to do that, you gotta have like 4 cards in your hand at that point, and then once you have done that, you're kind of out of cards, right? So this card, in my opinion, is kind of just going to be used to enable finishers as like a finishing game state. It's going to try to set up those times where you get somebody low, and then, maybe you do have like 2 Lightning Bolts and a Crushing Blow in your hand, and you're nowhere near 11 Magicka, but if this card sticks for a turn, then you can unload a ton of burst damage and finish off your opponent. That's ultimately the primary use I see for this card, because once you do use all these actions that do damage, you're going to be out of cards, and that's the big issue. Now, there are ways to draw cards, obviously. Cards like Ice Spike become free, and they replace themselves. That's great. If you want to be extra saucy, you could play something like Swindler's Market and make your Ice Spikes trigger that, because it effectively costs 0. But there's not a lot of things. Mage's Trick replaces itself. You have cards like Shimmering Peddler or Namira Shrine, where if you play a bunch of cards, then you could draw cards at the end of your turn, but then you're kind of banking on Destruction Tutor, not only, surviving the initial turn, but surviving multiple turns to start generating that level of value, and that's going to be pretty difficult. So this card is okay, but it reminds me a lot of when the Forgotten Hero collection was revealed. There was a lot of cards that seemed okay at the time that we now, after other cards have been printed, see played very, very frequently, right? Doppelganger, when it was revealed, for example, people were like, I can kind of see some uses, might be used in some greedy strategies. Ulfric's Uprising kind of fell into that same boat, right? People were like, well, it's more of a win more card because you've already got to have bodies on the board and blah, 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 blah. And then Houses of Morrowind came out, and we got things like Necromancer that makes Doppelganger have a lot more value. We got things like Genius Pathmage that made Doppelganger have a lot more value. We got cards like Nixox that really made Ulfric's Uprising explode. So this is a similar card in my mind. It's not great right now. You know, like I said, it'll help set up finishers. I mean, it'll certainly make those decks better than they were, but they already weren't very good in the current meta, and as long as Withered Hand Cultist is seeing the widespread play that it is, all this is doing is potentially negating what is already a creature that would be played sooner and putting you on your back foot, and then just getting, you know, if the Withered Hand Cultist is on the board and you play your Destruction Tutor, now your actions are just going to cost what they would normally cost, and that's 2 turns probably too late. So this card needs, for it to thrive, something that has not been printed yet. For example, things to keep an eye out in the future would be something like, if you play an action, draw a card. And that's really important because it's the immediacy that matters. Shimmering Peddler, Namira Shrine, those effects trigger at the end of your turn. So you empty your hand and then you refill. If we ever see something where it's play an action, draw a card, or for every 2 actions you play, draw a card, something like that, that's going to allow you to chain through in a single turn, and that is the big deal. That's the important piece. You need a way to kind of chain through things, and then this card goes from, you know, kind of cheeky, kind of good, to being potentially great. Even more so when you consider cards like Thorana, where you can really start running like Ice Spike Chains, but then because of this card, you know, spending 1 on a Mage's Trick, spending 1 even on like Crushing Blows, as long as you're drawing more cards and ramping and cycling through, ends up being really good. So that's the sort of things that I would keep an eye out for in the future, and if not that specifically, just other ways to have that occur. Now, other things I want to note, this card doesn't do an awful lot for you in terms of helping out Ice Storm, for example. I know that a couple of people had mentioned, like, hey, it makes your Ice Storms cheaper. Well, yeah, but this card costs 5, so realistically you were playing this just 1 turn before you would play Ice Storm anyway. The only way that this helps you with your Ice Storms is if Withered Hand Cultist is already on the board, because then it brings the cost back down, and then maybe you can still do it on 6, where they were trying to prevent you from doing it on 6. But yeah, I think this card is interesting. It's one of those ones, much like when Forgotten Hero came out, I believe this is one to watch for the future. I think it's one that, as new cards show up, as new cards get printed, you will have to say to yourself, like, is there a way that I can maybe abuse this with Destruction Tutor, because it has that kind of potential? But in the current meta, with the current card set, I don't personally foresee this having a huge impact. Now, I could be wrong. There might be some really interesting combo that in my less than 24 hours of time to digest this card probably exists, and maybe somebody smarter than me will find it, like TDC Jason or something. But right now, current cards printed, I think it's cool, I think it's neat, but I don't think there's enough to really, like, let this thing go off as is. So I want to know what you think. Like always, I love reading the comments. Even if I don't respond to all of them, I promise you I do read all of them. So I like hearing from you. Did I forget some really cool Magic combo? Do you think that this is going to be enough to make an action deck become viable? Do you just really want to see this in premium for the cool flame effects? Whatever, let me know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.